They were like people I had never seen before. "Congrats on marrying my brother. Your dress is cute, but don't you think mine looks better?" my sister-in-law said. "Oh, saying that will make the bride feel bad," she continued, pretending to joke. It was supposed to be my happiest day, but in the bridal dressing room, I was left speechless by my sister-in-law and mother-in-law's rude comments. They spoke with an arrogant tone, and I was shocked. My sister-in-law's outfit was unbelievable. She wore a dress so white it could compete with any bride's dress. It had a slit showing off her legs, and she wrapped fur around her off-the-shoulder top. My mother-in-law looked at her daughter with admiration, while my husband stared at his family coldly. I never thought I'd be treated so badly on my wedding day. It was too much to handle. Looking back, it's no wonder my sister-in-law's matchmaking efforts ended in failure with behavior like that, even at someone else's wedding. My name is Annaya. I was born in a coastal town and grew up in a regular family. When I went to a state university, I stayed with my maternal grandmother, who lived nearby. Living with grandma, who had always pampered me, was a dream come true. Her well-kept house had a mix of Western and traditional styles, and it had a warm, nostalgic atmosphere. I loved sitting on the balcony, overlooking the small garden, chatting with grandma while eating seasonal fruits. Even after I got a job, I stayed there. When grandma got sick, I took care of the house, hoping she'd come back, but that wish never came true. When she could no longer live on her own, she moved to a care home in my hometown. "I want to take care of grandma," I said, but she smiled and told me, "You've done enough, Annaya. I want you to find happiness." After grandma passed away, I married Jesse, who had always been there for me. Now we live in the house filled with grandma's memories. But what should have been a peaceful newlywed life is constantly interrupted by those two women. "How did someone as plain-looking and skinny as you marry my brother?" my sister-in-law once asked me. One day, my mother-in-law asked me to make lunch for my sister-in-law while she went to a neighborhood meeting. Instead of being thankful, my sister-in-law greeted me with sarcasm. I wanted to leave, but I knew they would just come to my house if I did. "Ask your brother," my sister-in-law said, satisfied with her own conclusion. "Well, maybe you two are a good match since he's not that great either." She then gulped down the curry I made. She probably thinks that eating small bites in front of men makes her more attractive. My sister-in-law may seem mean, but what's truly scary is that she doesn't even realize how rude she is. She looks down on everyone, including me and her own brother, without a second thought. It's exhausting. My mother-in-law, who raised her, is no better. Instead of disliking me, my mother-in-law focuses on making her daughter look good by criticizing me and ordering me around. That's why she calls me for these kinds of tasks. If I ignored my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law would either call me nonstop or ring my doorbell endlessly. It was like living in a nightmare. My mother-in-law always said her daughter was the most important person in her life and never really cared about her son. My husband insists he was never mistreated, but he also says he was never given much attention. His father went on a work trip 10 years ago and never came back. Even after retiring, he still sends money for living expenses, so it seems neither my mother-in-law nor sister-in-law care about him. My husband tries to talk to them about their behavior, but they never listen. To them, he's just someone else to look down on. Watching my husband suffer hurt more than my own struggles, and I often gave in to my mother-in-law's demands, which was a mistake. As a result, both of them became more unbearable, and the stress began to affect our marriage. We knew we couldn't continue like this. Determined, my husband and I decided to come up with a plan. Just as we were about to put it into action, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law showed up unexpectedly at our house on a hot summer day. My husband was at work, so I reluctantly greeted them. "Hello, sister-in-law. What brings you here?" I asked. "Just because we're your cute sister-in-law and mother-in-law doesn't mean we need a reason to visit. You should fix that stingy attitude. It's hot outside. Let us in." "You're so inconsiderate," she replied. I really didn't want to let them into grandma's house, but to avoid a scene, I had no choice. I served them coffee and some cookies I had baked the day before. "No cake?" they asked. "I'm sorry, you came unexpectedly," I explained. "Well, it's okay. Your cooking is decent, even if a bit plain," they said. I was surprised to hear them compliment me, but it felt more unsettling than pleasant. "The house is old, but it's spacious. It's passable," they remarked. To me, grandma's house was perfect. Then, out of nowhere, my mother-in-law announced, my sister-in-law, is getting married." I was stunned for a moment, but considering how she always bragged about her body and bold approach with men, it wasn't entirely shocking. It seemed to work on gullible guys or those looking for some fun. Is it the guy you had an affair with? I asked, remembering a man she once mentioned. It wasn't an affair, we just met at the wrong time. It's true love, she said, trying to justify it. But no, not him. The one who recently approached you, I continued. I just noticed him staring at me and went up to him first. But no, not him either, she replied. Then who? I asked. Elle met him at a speed dating event. He's the son of a wealthy man, my mother-in-law announced proudly. That's right. I'm having a shotgun wedding with a rich guy. Good for me. Unlike your brother who married someone like you, my sister-in-law said with a smirk, adding that she was already pregnant. She didn't miss the chance to insult me. The speed dating event had been about 3 months ago, and she likely charmed an unsuspecting man. I felt sorry for him and his family. Did you break up with the other guys? I asked. Not yet. They all love me so much. I can't bear to tell them, she said smugly, but it's inevitable. I'm just too lovable, she boasted. What really drove her, though, was money. I had a feeling this was the case, but I still wondered if the child was even from that wealthy man. Then they revealed their true motive. We want to use this house for the pre-wedding family introduction. I was so disgusted that I immediately said, no way. They glared at me, and to avoid an argument, I tried to smooth things over. I think the groom's family would want to see the bride's real home. Besides, our place is small and a bit messy, I explained. Then clean it up and stop smoking inside, my sister-in-law snapped. But won't they find it strange to come to the bride's brother's house? I asked. You're not getting it, she replied. We'll just say, this is my family's home. What if they find out the truth? I pushed. As long as you and your husband stay quiet, it'll be fine. Once we're married, he's mine, and I'm pregnant, so it's not that simple, she said. Why don't you just make this house belong to mom and dad? She suggested. Her outrageous idea left me speechless. Oh, what a great idea. This house is old, but we'll take it, she added. This is my grandma's house. It's not just my decision, I said, shocked. Don't you know? Once you're married, everything belongs to the husband's family, my sister-in-law retorted. I've never heard of such a rule, I replied, confused. Well, learn it now. What's yours is ours, she said confidently. So next Sunday, we'll bring the fiancé and his family. Oh, and make a fancy meal. We'll tell them Elle made it. And change the curtains to match Elle's style, she added. They left after dumping all their demands on me, leaving me seething with anger and a pile of dirty dishes. That night, my husband, feeling guilty, said, I'm sorry, we won't let them use the house. Of course not, but even if we refuse, they'll just show up anyway. Maybe we should move up our plan, I suggested. I could handle them bullying me, but I couldn't stand them disrespecting grandma's house. We'll get back at them for everything, so brace yourself, my husband said, determined. The next day, I made several phone calls. Despite the last-minute change, everyone was understanding, and I felt grateful. Once everything was set, I called my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law, I want Elle's wedding to be a success. Can we have a bit more time? We're thinking of remodeling the house to make it more suitable for the couple, I said, playing along. Annaya, I misunderstood you. You're such a good person, she said, thinking I was on their side. But we have wedding preparations to deal with, she added, still focused on their plans. Please hurry up, my mother-in-law said. I understand. We'll be ready in 3 weeks. In the meantime, why don't you start looking for a wedding venue? I suggested. You're so thoughtful, it's almost scary. But yes, we'll leave the introduction to you and focus on the wedding, she replied. It felt like our first pleasant conversation, and probably the last. They had no idea what was coming and wouldn't visit the house until the big day. My husband and I had a tight deadline, but we worked non-stop, even sacrificing sleep. We knew it was for our future. 3 weeks later, the day my mother-in-law had set for the family introduction finally arrived. My husband and I anxiously waited for her call. I could already imagine the fury on her face. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Annaya, what have you done? She screamed, her voice hysterical. I thought you'd appreciate it. I prepared the perfect vacant land and a meal for you and Elle. I calmly replied. What have you done? She screamed again, but her words were hard to understand. The place where she had taken her fiancé's family, claiming it was her home, was no longer grandma's house. I had arranged for a new home and meal, but they clearly weren't happy. I realized my mother-in-law wanted me to explain what was going on. I responded sweetly. I'm sorry if I upset you. Could you put me on speaker so the groom's mother can hear? The shouting stopped, and a polite voice came on the line. Are you Aaron's mother? I asked. It seems there's been some misunderstanding. I pretended to confuse the groom with several men my sister-in-law had been involved with. Oh, is it Ivan or Phil? I listed more names. Annaya, stop it. My mother-in-law shrieked louder than ever before. Then the call abruptly ended. I could imagine them in the middle of a huge argument. That felt good, I said with a smile. My husband, who had listened to the whole conversation, looked at me apologetically. I'm sorry for making you do that. I should have handled it, he said. No, remember I told you I wanted to get back at them for what they did to Grandma's house. I reminded him. Grandma always wanted me to be happy. I love that house, but you are more important to me. In truth, my mother, Grandma's heir, had already planned to demolish the house. It wasn't earthquake resistant, and maintaining such an old place was difficult. I had insisted on staying because I loved it, but after dealing with my in-laws, I changed my mind. I didn't want them to ruin Grandma's house, but I also didn't want to leave my husband. So, I decided to say goodbye to the house with fond memories. That's why I asked my husband to find a new job, and we prepared to move back to my hometown. We just sped up our plans. I had Grandma's house demolished and built a small dog house in the middle of the vacant lot, with a tag that read L. It was designed like a log cabin, and we even went slightly over budget for it. I filled a small dish with the most expensive dog food from the pet store. Everything was set. Grandma liked you. She wouldn't want us to break up because of that house. Annaya, I promise I won't waste this chance you've given me, my husband said earnestly. I made the decision because I believed in him. A year and a half has passed since then. After we moved to my hometown, my husband, who was initially a bit unsure about the tough fisherman neighbors, is now more loved by them than I am. The coastal town's breeze and seafood-rich dishes seem to suit him well. His once pale complexion has completely changed. Seeing him happily enjoy grilled salmon for dinner fills me with peace and contentment. Did you get any emails today? I asked one evening. No, nothing recently. They're probably too busy, he replied. We haven't been in touch with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law since the incident. My husband's phone is the only connection we have with them. We later heard about the doghouse fiasco from a neighbor who had been close to Grandma. Apparently, when my mother-in-law and sister-in-law brought the fiancé's family to see what they claimed was their home, they found nothing but the demolished lot with the little doghouse and a dish filled with expensive dog food. The luxurious smell from the food must have added to their embarrassment. The two were furious, accusing me of harassing them, but that wasn't the worst part. After hearing hints about my sister-in-law's questionable taste in men during a phone call, the fiancé's family confronted her. She couldn't give them any clear answers, so they hired a private detective. The investigation revealed all of her lies and past relationships. This led to a DNA test for the unborn child, and it was confirmed that the baby wasn't the wealthy man's. Naturally, the engagement was called off. The baby's real father turned out to be another man she had been seeing. Luckily for her, he was thrilled to have a child with her, and the two ended up getting married. However, the man's mother, who adored her son, wasn't happy about him marrying an older woman with a questionable past. Furious, she insisted that they live together. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, upset that her daughter had been taken, rented an apartment near the newlyweds, and the two mothers seemed to clash daily. Sister-in-law, who had dreamed of marrying rich and living a luxurious life, now seems worn out. She's constantly bullied by her mother-in-law and has to juggle household chores and childcare. But there is a bright side: her husband adores their baby, so it's really up to them to manage their life. One day, my husband's phone rings. Oh, it's an invitation for drinks from my dad, he says. His father has really warmed up to him. I enjoy his stories, and my mother-in-law always prepares my favorite dishes, he added. I realize now that my own mother never cared about my favorite things. This is what family feels like, he murmured. I reassured him. Don't worry, you'll be the kind of parent who knows all their child's favorites. As I gently rubbed my growing belly, he smiled warmly. I feel like we can make that happen in this home, he said, looking up at the beautiful caramel-colored beam on the ceiling. That beam came from Grandma's house when we demolished it, and we had it incorporated into our new home as a reminder of her. It was my husband's idea to keep the beam, while I had just wanted to tear everything down. That's why I chose a future with him. Let's make this house as wonderful as Grandma's, I said. Yes, absolutely, he agreed. In our small house, in this peaceful coastal town where you can hear the sound of the waves, we are building our happiness.